I don't think it's an overstatement to say that we've been playing kind of a leadership role on name, image, and likeness in terms of thinking and what the practices ought to be. And as you can see, I insist on adding the extra I there in blue because that stands for influencer. Name, image, and likeness, of course, comes out of the legal case, the Ed O'Bannon case, which ultimately, where it was decided that students had the right to their name, image, and likeness, they should be precluded from benefiting from that while they were competing as student athletes. And with the smiling faces you see up there today, they should, at least a couple of them should look familiar. We've had a number of conversations over time dating back to January of this year, long before any of this was decided in terms of what might happen with name, image, and likeness. So we're really happy. I'm going to stick over that piece. Let me go to this. I may jump back a little bit. So we're very happy to have Michael Zorb, who's the VP of Channel Partnerships at Open Doors. Open Doors is a terrific platform, and it's a terrific platform in this space that I know is very, very helpful. And we're really happy to have their knowledge and perspective as part of this ongoing conversation about name, image, and likeness. Michael and Blake Lawrence have added tremendously to our knowledge base as we talked about what best practices ought to be going forward. And then we also have Ray Katz, who's co-founder and COO of Collegiate Sports Management Group. And Ray too has been involved with this as the name of his enterprise suggests, because this is really a foundational shift in terms of collegiate sports in many, many ways. We had hoped to have Dan Donnelly here today. Dan is with Fox Sports, and he's very knowledgeable in this space. Dan had participated in actually the last live session we had for our winter summit in February 2020. Dan was generous and joined us for that. And then he's also joined some of the Zoom conferences that we've done over time talking about the space. Because he wasn't here today, he was kind enough to kind of lend his perspective, and he's happy for it to be shared. His perspective from the Fox Sports chair is that name, image, likeness plus influencer has clearly been a hot topic of conversation, but in the media world, it has not yet been a significant factor. And I know that there are different points of view about that, and I think that that's part of the conversation we want to have today. So I guess I never really got the account executive instinct out of my body, so I decided to put all the topics there on the board in terms of what we want to talk about. And we're not limited to these, and the conversation can go lots of different ways. But Michael and Ray, let's start with the first one, which is, what do you see as the early returns on NIL plus I? If you were taking it as a point of departure from Dan Donnelly, he'd say lots of conversation, not a whole lot of action. I know some of us have different perspectives on that, so maybe you guys can jump in and share your perspective.
Sure. You microphone good?
Yes.
This is for the online audience? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now I know what volume. I don't want to knock anybody out and yell at this thing. Thanks for having me. It's awesome again, like you said before, to gather in person and be part of this stuff. It seems like in my world that things have really started to open up again recently. I've been traveling around a fair amount the last few weeks, last 4 to 6 weeks. But I'm happy to be here in this really cool setting, and especially on this day. Thanks for pointing that out earlier. Thank you guys. Early returns on NIL. I don't necessarily disagree with Dan's quote at all on that. I think that as a whole, we have just scratched the surface of where this is headed and where it can be. I think it's hard for right now for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around the scale of this. So we look at it from athlete endorsement world. So Open Doors is an athlete endorsement technology platform. Essentially, we try to make the process of for a brand to work with an athlete as easy and efficient as possible. We've been doing that. We've been around for almost 10 years. We've been doing that primarily in the professional space with partnerships with the NFLPA, NLBPA, NBPA, you name it, and it's there. And brands like EA Sports, Panini, Pepsi, when they want to activate with their athletes, primarily on social media, Open Doors is the platform that they utilize to do those operations. And so that's our history. And with this, the evolution of this athlete endorsement industry, which is now widely known as NIL. NIL was something that, 2 years ago, you could have pulled people on the street, nobody would have known what you were talking about. And now it's a pretty commonly used phrase and a pretty well-known thing. But name, image, likeness is not new. I mean, athletes have been around for decades. You just get tons of examples at Subway. But it is new to the college space. And what that did is essentially change the athlete endorsement industry. From any given year, there was roughly 5,000 professional athletes across all sports. The 5 major leagues, as well as the MLS and so on. Every year.
Include Premier League and everything. In that calculation, I'm just trying to.
So just to be clear, yes. So that's essentially professional sports, period, right? That's approximately, I don't know exactly where to cut that off. If the 3rd level cricket league in India is factored into that or what, but
Hey, don't
in general,
don't take cricket lightly, because
Yeah.
Disney was blaming delayed cricket for their streaming signups being
huge
low.
audiences, for sure, huge audiences. But with our athlete number, like any, an athlete in any given year, our number is approximately 5,000, right, in the professional ranks. Every year, there are 500,000 student athletes. So the pool of athletes that you could work with just went up 100-fold overnight with the flip of a switch on July 1st. And so the sheer scale of that is what is exciting to us anyway. And for people to play in that space and work in that area, it's not going to be your traditional athlete endorsement type model. You're not going to work with an agent and negotiate a long form contract and do all this. That's just not going to be possible with that many with 500,000 student athletes across the country. And so what we're trying to do is provide technology to make it possible for people to not just work with them, but find them. Who are they? Where are they located? What do they have to bring to the table? So browsing, booking, making sure it gets completed, payment, that whole process happens within our platform. And so this just started on July 1st, and to Dan's quote, in July, there was a ton of buzz and there was a fair amount of movements, and there were some early brands that we feel like have some success stories to tell. But the exciting thing that we're seeing is, even though the buzz may have worn down from a media perspective, we saw twice as many deals in August as what we saw in July. And we saw 4 times as many deals in September as what we saw in August. And we haven't recapped the October yet, but you're talking about just in our platform. And so I want to remind you, 500,000 student athletes. We're pretty excited because we just crossed 50,000 student athletes that have an Open Doors profile. So think of an Open Doors profile as like a LinkedIn profile. It's theirs. It's free. Any athlete can go on to Open Doors and build a profile. So we crossed 50,000. We're all excited. That's 10% of the available out there. And of those 50,000, we're approaching approximately 10,000 of them have gotten a deal. And that's just in our platform. But that's 20% of the student athletes that have an Open Doors profile have received at least a deal so far in the first 3 months.
So this is a private meeting. We'll obviously do video, but for your with your chance to say you're good with it. Is that 5,000 number a public number? And the reason I'm asking that question, Michael, is that, I get called with some regularity by people saying, I'm hearing this negative theme to one of the questions we're getting at later. And it would be helpful to me to say, well, by the way, did you know that, 10,000 already, the 10,000 number is a very meaningful number. And in the conversation that's out there right now, I think that would be a positive countervailing force in a good way, if that's usable.
So I'm gonna give us a selfish plug. I won't distinguish between what is confidential and what is usable, but most everything, if I say here, you're fine, so use it wherever you want. And a lot of this information that I'm gonna reference is actually available. Give a plug to our website. We do a blog, and we do, at this point, we're doing monthly market recaps based on ours. So we're actually starting to release standings, and we're ranking by conference where the dollars are going and the number of deals, the number of athletes, what sports, male, female, we're tracking all of that. Because it's like, we're realizing that we're gonna be sitting on a pile of data that is super valuable in this entire industry. And so we're already transitioning towards figuring out how to utilize the data and release it, and not only be a place where people they can work with us for a brand to work with an athlete, but also we can be a resource for when it comes to data on industry trends and so forth. So yes, I guess the short answer is whatever I reference here today is fine to go out publicly.
Just a quick question, Michael. So any surprises in the first few months of the data that jump out to you based on confidence, whatever it might be? Just curious.
Yeah, I think what is maybe not surprising to me or us, but surprising to most people is maybe not the activities, but the compensation.
Okay.
Right? So the only ones that get talked about are Dr. Pepper and the Clemson quarterback, or these big time deals that replicate what we're used to seeing, the pro athlete endorser model, right? But it's completely flipped the game on this. When I reference over 10,000 student athletes getting a deal, and it's primarily for them to do a social post or maybe an appearance or what have you, but there is a specific brand, and this is public, so I can reference it. There's I guess I would consider them at this point anyway, they're growing so fast, maybe this is not accurate, but a smaller startup delivery app company called GoPuff. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar. Just in these first 3 months alone, there have been, I want to make sure the numbers are accurate, but it's also in real time. So we're sitting here on November 11th, and there's literally 50 plus more that happen every single day. But there have been over 3,000 student athletes do a social post to promote the GoPuff app in the first 90 days and have been compensated for that. And the results of that have been thousands and thousands of app downloads for GoPuff at a minimal investment from their standpoint. Their user acquisition strategy of if the athlete has to download the app, they get compensated to do those social posts, they get credit in the app, they make a purchase, they post about what they purchased in their experience. So right away they're getting an app download because that's one of the actions that the athletes have to take. And then they post it to their circle and their sphere. And the thing is, when we were talking to GoPuff about this, and we were asking them questions we normally would ask brands like, what are you looking for the type of person, or what's their audience makeup need to be, or what's the size of their following? They're like, at this rate, we don't care. Anyone who wants to do this gets it. So with that comment, we came up with this idea of it's a welcome offer. So literally every student athlete that creates a profile on Open Doors, the instant that they create their profile, they get pinged. They get their first deal within seconds, and it's from GoPuff. And it's at a rate where they're comfortable giving it to anybody, even if they have, they realize they may have a student athlete post about it and they have 25 followers. But they also may get somebody to post about it and they have 10,000 followers. And so they set a rate that they were comfortable with. And they're, at this point, it was meant to be a 30-day welcome offer, and they keep extending it month after month. And at this point, they've said that they have no intentions of stopping it, because even with the acceptance rate at the compensation amount, the acceptance rate is down between 20 and 30%. It kind of fluctuates, but on the whole, that's what we're seeing. So you're seeing what 70 to 80% of the athletes pass on the offer because of the, I'm assuming, the compensation. But they literally thousands of people activating about that brand all in a short amount of time. And we were in Chicago last week for the Sports Business Journal Brand Summit, and we actually presented with the I probably mess up his title, but in my head now, because of your topics, I have CMO, and I'm not sure if that's his title or not. But our contact at GoPuff, we presented jointly about this campaign. And they literally, and this is, you know, a selfish plug here, but they said, we don't even know how this would happen without open doors. Like, how could you at scale get 3,000 different people to do anything and prove that they did it and pay them to do it? And so that's, you know, the very first bullet here of
It's
early.
basically like the new version of the old school campus ambassador, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's great.
But for speed, efficiency,
Right.
tracking, and
Sure.
the difference between
Yeah.
a pro athlete or a campus ambassador is nobody cares if they're being compensated. In this new era, this new space of college NIL, the student athletes have to disclose their activity.
Mhm.
So that adds a whole nother layer of logistics of keeping track of all of this, that we bring a solution to that table, because as part of the transaction, they upload proof, they get compensated once they upload proof and the brand approves. And once that all happens, the student athlete can click the button and disclose it to their school. So it's all a streamlined process. But I kind of went on for too long. I promise I'll let you talk, Ray, at some point. But I really have tried to make an effort, especially these last 30 days, but really this first 90 days, of trying to paint a picture of the opportunity and the scale of this. And so back to Dan's quote, yes, we have not even scratched the surface. Like, so for him to say that we've really not noticed it from a media spin, that's not surprising, because we, like, what I would consider the big brands have really yet to even step foot in this space. And so what we're seeing already with the growth, the July, August, September growth, and the tens of thousands of transactions just on our platform. Because you got to remember, there's other ways you can work with these people. We have competitors, there's other marketplaces. You can shoot, we have stories of, I don't want to jump ahead, but I saw your RVs. Like they're just DMing athletes directly and saying, you want to work with us? Like there's so many ways to do this. And the data that we are collecting is just within our platform. So if you even, I don't know how, but if you try to extrapolate that out over everything, you're just seeing this momentum and snowball build in an industry that literally is 4 months old.
Well, I would say a couple things. First, your experience makes me happy, because it kind of reinforces the fact that it's not the NIL, but it's the I, it's the influencer side of the equation here, which is really driving some of those examples. Let me know if this is something that you're at liberty to talk about. Is there a median number for what compensation those 10,000 athletes are receiving?
So it's interesting. So, here's a couple of cool facts that I also want to throw out there. Stats. Those athletes that have been compensated through our platform so far also are representatives of over 500 different institutions and all 3 divisions of NCAA, Division 1, 2, and 3. So the question you just asked me, we actually have broken down on our website by division. It does vary. Right now, through our platform, the average compensation at the Division 1 level, I think, is around $490.
Mm-hmm.
And in Division 2, it drops down significantly to, I can't remember exactly, less than 100.
Yep.
And at Division 3, it's right around 50 or less than 50. So you're talking $30 to $50, 80 to 100, and then upwards of, close to 500 for Division 1 athletes.
But that's probably for a couple of activities, not for a long-term situation. Obviously.
That's what we consider per deal. And a deal can have multiple activities. Yes.
Right. We were talking around you.
No worries. I talk too much usually already, so it's a pleasure.
I have that since.
So what's your take on the early returns on NIL plus side?
I think just to echo what Michael said, and we're really blessed to be in a strategic partnership with Open Doors and do some managed service work for them. They're the best, and they have the most true deals and best history doing this. So it's exciting to be here with Michael. It's exciting to be here with the professor that got me into marketing, Dr. and my first boss that in advertising through the Pace taught me probably 80% of what I learned in the first 10 years of my career. I think the returns are a little disappointing from a big company standpoint, frankly. I've heard too many times it's just easier to buy ESPN than it is to buy a bunch of mid-major conferences, D2s and D3s that we represent. And it is easier to just buy ESPN. ESPN's tremendous. Their Plus product has been a huge success, especially recently. To echo what's been said earlier, it still shows the power of television. Our Big Sky Conference is still doing 20 to 30 times as many concurrent viewers for comparable games on television as they are on ESPN Plus, and that's a success. But I think brands haven't really taken advantage of the opportunity, because it's not easier to buy one Clemson quarterback than it is to buy 100 quarterbacks with the same number of social influencers, diversify the risk thanks to the Open Doors platform. So for example, real estate companies are now offering more than just selling you a house. They're offering relocation services, information on neighborhoods, moving companies, etc. So if I was going to sign a quarterback for that, I would say, give me 100 quarterbacks. Let's have a couple of featured ones, and let's have the ability to elevate some of the other ones, because that's essentially what we're doing. We're the quarterback of your move.
So let's do the quarterback thing, even though I didn't put it up there. So two of the most prominent things that happened early, maybe three of the most prominent things were Dr. Pepper went with DJ Uiagalelei, the successor to Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, and because he was Trevor Lawrence's successor, he was of course going to be successful himself, which turned out not to be the case. And then a lot of other companies decided to do business with Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma because he was the successor to both Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. So he of course was going to be successful. He's now on the bench behind Caleb Williams. And then Nick Saban, who usually does things right down at Alabama, said his quarterback, also a successor to Tua and Mac Jones, and before that, Jalen Hurts, Bryce Young, he said Bryce Young got $1 million worth of NIL money. All of those things to me, because of it's impossible to predict the performance of the next guy, right? And also, what's really going on in Alabama. Those three things seem to be perceived in a highly negative way because of failures in the first two and cost in the third. And to some people, that has kind of cast a pall over this. People will say NIL isn't work. It's a big mistake. Look what happened with Dr. Pepper. Look what happened with Spencer Rattler. Look what's happening with Nick Saban saying it's $1 million take for the quarterback and the rest of the team doesn't get anything. Has that been the big negative that has had to be overcome, or how do you guys see it above and beyond what you've already said?
Well, I'll start on this one and turn it over to Michael. But yeah, I definitely think it's going to make brands scared, and it's going to make brands take a let's see how this develops approach. But again, in order to do effective sports marketing, you have to really know two things: sports and marketing. And anybody that really follows sports understands that the performance of a professional athlete generally is going to be a lot more predictable than the performance of a college freshman or a college sophomore or a new starting quarterback. So it would not stop me if I were sitting in the marketer side from continuing to focus on quarterbacks. I would increase my focus beyond quarterbacks, depending on what my brand is, on other positions as well. But no matter what, I would diversify. And what we do at Collegiate Sports Management Group, we work with schools outside the Power Five and the conferences in which they play. And in our case, it's not a question of I can invest in Trevor Lawrence or Clemson football. It's a question of, wow, now I can support University of Montana football, all the media and their quarterback and great defensive end. So it's a little bit different. I would take advantage of the diversification as a brand and look at other positions. If I'm a State Farm, I'm talking about, protection. I'm gonna sign up 50 left tackles, for example.
Great. Michael?
Yep, no, I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, right, around the buzz and the media attention and about this. It's always central around these big deals or the big name ones. And to me, I think it's missed the mark, or it's missed the true opportunity of this. Very rarely in college athletics, and you can go back decades, but we can probably sit in here, if there's sports fans, and name on one hand or two hands what we would consider a nationally marketable athlete while they're in college. And so I don't understand it's essentially trying to put a square peg through a round hole when you're trying to take the pro athlete endorsement model and apply it to the college space. It doesn't make sense. So nothing against Dr. Pepper, but to me, even when they signed that deal, it didn't make sense to me. To Ray's point, they could have probably spent somewhat similar money and went and found the best quarterback in all 50 states and had them doing localized marketing for them, and it would have been far more impactful, and they wouldn't have had all this downside now that they have work. I don't know about you guys, but I've yet to see that TV spot run. So it seems like that
The
was.
Dr. Pepper one?
Yeah,
Oh, I've seen it.
you have, okay,
I'm
well,
a high level consumer. of college.
okay. So.
But you're above high level.
Yeah, my point is that was a pretty big gamble on that, and I think that the reason that's turned into a kind of scare story is because that I think it was the wrong approach personally.
Well, so let's talk about that for a little bit. So I'll give you my perspective, having done these things for a few years. So July 1 was the date that this all came down. The college football season actually starts prior to the pro season. So if you were quote unquote week 0, you were like August 20 something is the start of the season.
Yep.
Dr. Pepper has had thematic campaigns around college football, including that Fansville campaign. My view was they believe, and I don't want to give us credit for something we don't deserve, but they kind of believe the whole first mover notion that we were talking about. I think they had Fansville done, and they said, let's show that we're a leader in college football, so let's put a college football player in there. Because it looks like, again, if you know production, they went and shot DJ Uyunglele on a green screen and threw him in with no speaking line in a spot which has got a lot of speaking, right? So to me, that was a post facto, let's make sure that people know that we're in the game with college athletes, and let's pick him. He had 2 good games last year when Trevor Lawrence was prohibited from playing because of COVID, so he's got to be good. I actually applaud them for being aggressive, but I think they could have been more thoughtful about what they did, and they probably wanted multiple people to do that.
Yeah.
That spot actually, in some of their I would call it franchise media, like, Dan wouldn't like me bringing this up, but like Game Day on ESPN, I saw that at least half a dozen times there, and I think I probably missed another half dozen times. So they ran it a lot early. I think when Clemson's on-field performance was not up to their standard, I think they pulled back from it. Was kind of my view.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Mike, I agree with you on that, and I applaud them for wanting to try to because there's also the motives behind jumping into this, it can be different, but if someone is getting into it with the motive to support student athletes in this new opportunity and new endeavor, then they should always be applauded for that, in my opinion. But I think it was one of those where you're exactly right. No one knew for sure whether this was going to actually turn on or not until the last second, and you had 5 weeks to try to do something with it if you really wanted to. So it's easy to sit here and play, armchair quarterback, no pun intended, looking back at it. But in that moment, they were trying to do what they could to at least participate, be part of this, and get the early mover advantage and all of that. So it's easy for me to sit here and kind of poke holes in it after the fact because DJ has underperformed and everything else. But it doesn't negate my overall point, which is I think that as this evolves and as the brands who are sitting on the sidelines taking the wait and see approach, if they end up jumping into this, they'll see that the college athlete industry is different than the professional, and they'll adapt and they'll utilize it in a different way. And I think it'll be additive to what they're doing in many other places.
Great. Dave, you have a question?
So one of the things that I hear about, and by the way, I love the GoPuff example, and I think this sounds really great. But one of the things I hear about is a lot of local sponsorship. So the local gym wants somebody, or the local restaurant wants somebody, and that's in rest. But I have a different question, which is, I'm curious whether or not this is good for sports. Are we going to kill the golden goose? That is, the big time schools could go and recruit students and say, not only are you going to have all this opportunity, but because you're coming to play basketball at Duke, not that they ever have trouble recruiting, but because you're coming to play basketball at Duke, you're also going to get a bigger sponsorship, which is going to just create a bigger differential between the top teams and the lesser teams. And I recently met with the Purdue basketball coach. He was talking so much about the importance of team cohesion. And if some of the players are getting these big endorsements and others are not, it just separates within the team more. So I'm curious on both of your perspectives, or all three of your perspectives, on whether or not this is good for sports.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, your very first thing you said, I love. I just read a story this morning in The Athletic, I believe, about a local cookie company in Knoxville, Tennessee, who signed a deal with a defensive back on Tennessee's team. And whenever he gets an interception, Tennessee fans can come in and get a free cookie. And they have actually seen 35% increase in their business since they started this promotion. That's a great example of a local company working with a local athlete, and that's happening across the country. That's one of the cool things on our platform too, is being able to see the insights into that, where you see a local company paying the local softball player, to show up for an appearance and sign some autographs for the local kids who just
And those are happening on your platform also?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, so you're talking, this is the softball player example I just referenced, is Division III in a small town in Kansas. So, and that's an opportunity for that athlete to, this isn't life-changing money, but they're like, oh, I'll just go show up at the local Dairy Queen for an hour and sign some autographs and meet some local kids who watch our D3 softball team. So in general, that, to answer your question, is this good for sports? Like, I think that the fact that student athletes were prevented from doing things like that, it was nonsense. And so I do think it's good that this is now available to them as an opportunity. Your point or question about schools, the rich getting richer basically, and utilizing NIL and recruiting. I don't necessarily think, I think that would happen anyway, whether this happened or not, those systems are in place and those things are probably going to happen anyway. I don't think this is going to create an additional distinct advantage for any specific group. I think in fact it could. I'm from Nebraska, so this is my fanhood of Nebraska coming in. We've had
My condolences this year.
this year, we've had a rough couple decades. We've essentially been, negated to irrelevant for the last 20 years. And I look at this as like, I think that NIL could potentially be a springboard to help us get back and compete for those recruits that we need to get back into the upper echelon. And the reason why I say that is, obviously this is a marketing forum, so most of the conversation is focused around how brands are engaging with this. But the other thing you have to remember is there's different customer segments in this space, and you have fans and supporters who can be part of this. Think of things like Cameo shout out videos. You have student athletes now who make $50 at a time for wishing a kid happy birthday, right? Just because these are in their markets, these people are really big deals. And they have a window of opportunity where 10 years from now, fans will be like, oh yeah, I remember that player. But in this moment, they have an opportunity. And what we're trying to do at Open Doors is help them maximize that opportunity while they have this window of time. So I think this is a good segue for me to mention the fact that our founders are two former football players, and our CEO and co-founder had to retire from football. He was a linebacker at Nebraska for the Huskers because of concussion issues. And from that day forward, he intended on being an athlete, and woke up one morning, starting linebacker at Nebraska, went to bed that night, could never play football again. And since that day, he's dedicated his life and career into building something that would help athletes take advantage of their windows of opportunities because it's fleeting. And so, to your recruiting question, there has always been and will be ways for the top schools to continue to get to top athletes. But this could potentially unlock the way for creative schools to utilize the support of their fan base and their local markets and potentially brand campaigns to offset the system a little bit and maybe springboard to where you have, high level athletes signing at places like Memphis or what's the HBCU that
Howard.
Howard. Like that's a situation where maybe that doesn't happen without this.
Yeah, so I know
Yeah,
you,
sorry.
I want to jump in for a second. So I'm a pretty engaged observer of this, and I get a fair number of calls from different people about this. I don't know that I'll put this out there publicly, but I talked multiple times with Sally Jenkins from the Washington Post about this, right? And she will call me and say, I'm hearing this, do you think this is true? This sounds too negative, what's your perspective on it? And my conclusion from those several conversations is the current group of leaders and administrators in college athletics would like that storyline that you're talking about, Dave, to be out there because they want to inhibit the growth of this. And I think that there are a couple things that they're really missing, right? So the story that I always refer to about people who should have had a lot more money that don't is the running back Maurice Clarett at Ohio State University. He helped them win their first national title in a very, very long period of time. And if he was able to benefit from his name, image, and likeness, he would have had a wonderful financial cushion that could have carried him many years into the future. He then gets hurt. He ends up being a fourth-round draft choice. I think it was the Denver Broncos, and doesn't have much of a career, doesn't make much money. Is that fair? Personally, I don't think so. I actually think the quality of college basketball could get better because of NIL rather than worse. Because if I'm looking at the NBA, yeah, maybe I want to be on the Lakers, maybe I want to be on the Bulls, maybe I want to be on the Knicks, maybe I want to be on the Celtics. Do I really want to be with the Memphis Grizzlies or Sacramento Kings? If I'm building my brand, or to use the vernacular, building my platform, wouldn't I be better off staying at Duke or Kentucky or someplace else? I mean, again, if I had a business decision to make there, depends upon the person, right? But being in college longer may actually be a better decision, both from a skill standpoint and also from a visibility standpoint. And you're not going to hear that out there. And then right now we're talking about all these jobs in this country going begging, right? And how often have any of us, when we're recruiting somebody, saying, "Oh wow, the guy played or the gal played college athletics. Good. That means I know that they're a keen person." This is a great way to actually start to interact with people who you might want to bring into your company. And apparently that's going to be a much more competitive thing because of all the changes in the workforce and how people are looking at work in the last couple of years. And on top of that, it's the educational value, right? If somebody can learn about what's my value to this restaurant concept, this internet concept, this auto concept, how can I structure things that I can do something that's beneficial for them, but also makes me money as I'm a student athlete? I mean, hell, there should be, a course on, college sports entrepreneurship that a lot of people would want to take that would have bridges into all sorts of opportunities going forward. But I swear to God, I've talked to 4.5 athletic directors. It's the gnashing of teeth. I'm not going to get the big check from this brand anymore because they're going to go to the individuals. And I'm like, well, why don't you build them into your value proposition for those people that are writing you the big check? So, sorry. So I'm obviously passionate about it. It takes a little bit of imagination to get out of the old models. The professional model does not apply to the college universe, but there are so many other benefits. You just have to create the model that works for your business. But that takes thought and work and alignment.
Tony, that's exactly what we're doing, like with the SIAC conference and their amazing commissioner, Greg Moore. We're building NIL into a renewal of a big deal right now, actually taking that deal up 4x. And then somewhere between 15 and 30% of that deal is actually going to go into NIL, both enablement of the software and then actually signing up athletes. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing it for brands. We helped activate the SEC sponsorship with Cade York, the LSU kicker for Velveeta. That's going to grow moving forward. That's been a huge success. But David, to build on your question, I think it's clear that having more four-year athletes, fifth-year graduate players is going to improve the quality of college basketball. It kind of already has from what I've seen in terms of University of Kentucky. I do believe it's going to increase the competitive balance. Do you want to go and be the fifth best player or a sixth player on Duke when you can go and be like Patrick Baldwin, go to University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, play with his dad, maybe do some really cool NIL stuff with his dad, which is a whole other theme that can very much work across generations, University of Detroit, Mike Davis and his son, et cetera. I think
So
it's exciting stuff.
So let me just give the Patrick Baldwin. So Patrick Baldwin is at a non-name school, but he's going to be a top 5 pick in the 2022 NBA draft. And he's getting a lot of attention despite the fact he's not at the kind of blue blood kind of organization or reputational basketball program.
And I think the other area of competitive balance, just to build on that, is beyond great players going to mid-majors in football or even FCS in football. Give you a couple of examples. Ryan Greenhagen, who set a tackles record against University of Nebraska, first game of the season in Nebraska. If you want to do something about B2B in New York, tackling a business problem, well, nobody makes tackles better than Ryan Greenhagen. So he's an expert. That's an idea. And then I feel that St. John's basketball can really recoup some of its glory years because a lot of players may stay home if they're local heroes and then really build on what they've done, go to St. John's and blow out the New York market.
Barney.
I have a question for you, Dave, but also, do you see this as, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe it's a moot question, but do you see universities getting involved and say, if I can't beat them, I'm going to join them, and I'm going to set up my own NIL as a university, and, taking out the middleman, but also not offering this as a package to athletes to say, hey, we can help market you. So, and then does that also then make an AD's job that much more difficult? And do we see the compression of tenure time on an AD if he makes the wrong decision? And it's particularly with lower conferences that maybe don't have, am I going to get an NIL deal? Or am I going to invest in my facilities?
Yeah, I think to clarify on that question a little bit, so the school, why wouldn't the school set up their own NIL shop or whatnot? It depends on what you mean exactly by that. It is one of the rules, the NCAA didn't turn this thing on with many rules, but one of the rules that they did turn on was recruiting inducement, meaning if you come here, we will pay you this through an NIL.
No, but I'm saying they set up their own, and they get their local car dealerships, the alumni and say, okay, guys, we got all these opportunities in place.
Yeah.
We're going to set it up for you.
That would be essentially if the school was involved to facilitate that would be against the rules. But you are bringing up a topic that is an emerging trend right now in this NIL industry.
Yeah, look at what Oregon's doing, right?
Is what we're calling either NIL representation companies or NIL collectives, which is essentially non-school affiliated entities who are, the reason why we term them collectives is you have a lot of supporters and donors of the university who may be interested in supporting, but they don't necessarily want to take the time or the effort to go figure out how to pay a kid for a legitimate NIL deal. but they're saying, I'm willing to help contribute. So then you have some, enterprising people in these markets who say, okay, well, there's a big group of people who are willing to support, but they don't want to go to the effort to do it. We'll take their money and collect it and pool it, and we'll take on the responsibility of paying the athletes for legitimate NIL deals. Because what makes it a legitimate NIL deal is there has to be some quid pro quo. Like, they can't just pay them for nothing, and you have to have proof that you did the thing that you got paid for, and you have to disclose it. So as long as those boxes are checked, it is considered an NIL deal and within the rules the way that they are currently structured. Could there be more structured rules at some point? Maybe. There's still federal legislation talks going on. I think that, depending on who you would ask, there is potentially a need for more structure, but the way the rules are currently set up, the school cannot directly be involved in facilitating a deal for an athlete. But what you just brought up is people who are trying to create an advantage are figuring out a way around that and essentially forming, when you brought up Oregon. It's being spearheaded by Phil Knight, obviously the founder of Nike.
He knows a little bit about sports marketing.
A little bit, and he's got some funds to help too. Their local enterprise is called Division Street. And we're pretty familiar with that group, and the University of Oregon is a recently new Open Doors partner. So on the school side of our business, schools essentially can license our software, and by doing that, it gets their athletes access to things like education, curriculum, disclosure tools, ways the schools can help them build their brand. So the school can actually do quite a bit to help their student athletes enhance their value. They just can't go facilitate deals for them, but they can help them in that process from an education standpoint and brand building. But these local groups like Division Street, or there's been a few announced recently, Washington Huskies, Auburn, Sixth Man Strategies at Kansas.
I'm shocked that A&M doesn't have 12 men already.
Yeah, that is
Maybe 13 men.
that is a different customer segment. So the way that we break this out, and I wish I had a whiteboard to draw for you, is essentially like there are different customer segments, and each one of them are motivated differently. And so for the point of today, obviously we're discussing mostly around brand marketing, and we have a pretty good understanding of what their motives might be. But in this world, there are also different groups, and the donors and the fans, they have completely different motivations. It's not, ROI driven. It's, I'm willing to give money to be competitive to make sure that we have the best athletes and so forth. Which, that is a very interesting segment of this industry, but it is there. But yeah, so that's to kind of answer your question about why would the school just do this. Is the way the rules are set up, it prohibits them from being directly involved in facilitating compensation for their student athletes. There's a lot of things they can do and are doing or should doing. And Tony, to your point about classes, we are seeing, because Open Doors actually, we put out in the ether about, hey, if you're a professor and you're teaching a sports marketing class and you're going to talk about NIL, we'd be happy to be a guest speaker. So we literally just put out a link, and it's a form field for people to fill out.
He doesn't know.
270 requests for a Open Doors representative to speak in a college class because they're going to talk about NIL. And one of the forms that we have them answer on when they fill out the request is, do you have student athletes in your class? And the overwhelming majority of them, the answer is yes.
Do they attend the class? That's the question.
I hope so. They better attend that one if they want to try to figure out how to, maximize this new opportunity for them.
Attendance is taken.
At Manhattanville, they attend, I guarantee you they attend at Manhattanville, because I have them in my class now, so we're about to get a guest lecture arranged after this.
So we only have a couple minutes left, Frank. I think I'm doing your job. So I wanted to talk about one of the things that has popped up to me as a real positive has been the value of female athletes in the NIL plus I world, because they're great representatives. They've got usually terrific social media followings, and they're very, very adept with engaging their base. Do you see that in a similar light? Do you think that's going to continue or potentially accelerate? And any examples?
You want to take it?
I think that Blake and
Absolutely.
Michael were extremely prescient in their conversation about the Cavender twins at Fresno State. They've delivered everything expected and more, but I do think the opportunity moving forward is going to be to go to a broader range of female athletes across broader schools and really take this number. So far, we have 10,000 deals out of 500,000 athletes. 2%. I think a lot of the growth in the future is going to have to do with female athletes that have varied interests, varying side businesses, et cetera.
So let me jump. I'm gonna be dictatorial for a second. So agree with all of that. One of the interesting things has been debate about which female sport is going to be most prominent going forward. And when we were talking about women's college basketball, I was surprised to be getting an awful lot of pushback saying there's been a lot of effort been put in here, but we're not getting the same kind of energy and excitement as we are for women's volleyball. Do you guys have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I would say that I honestly think it will vary based on market. Like the one point I would love to make sure that everybody takes away from this conversation today is this new area or industry is and should be localized. So it depends on, I referenced Nebraska earlier, right? In Nebraska, volleyball is a huge deal. And the Nebraska volleyball players are getting NIL deals like crazy in Nebraska. That doesn't necessarily mean or apply that everywhere around the country, volleyball players are getting deals. UConn, women's basketball. In the South, gymnastics. I mean, you have, it's a localized approach. And so where the dollars are gonna flow you're not able to paint it with a wide brush across the whole country. It's going to be dependent on what's important to that school or region, and that's where you're going to see the opportunities. But to circle back on the point about women's athletes, your observation is exactly right. And so far in the execution side of this, like the deals we're already executing, they're just better at it. As a man, the male student athletes, like, they're really gonna have to get better. If they want to create this as a sustainable opportunity for them, they're gonna have to get better. And there's things in place to try to help them, but I give them the benefit of the doubt. They're young, they've never been able to do this before. They have a lot on their plate. They're student athlete influencers. It should be third on their priority list, right? So when we're working with brands and they're kind of, maybe voicing a few frustrations about how it takes longer than they would expect for the athlete to get back to them on something or whatever. There's still some learning and coaching going on like, hey, they're young, this is new to them. They have practice, school, everything else going on. Like, we're gonna have to try to figure out how to work within that world.
Customer management is not an innate skill.
Yeah, but it's an interesting thing because it's new. There's going to be learnings. Some are really good at it. But the ones where you're really seeing it, people like evolve into being star students, if you will. If they were going to give out an MVP award right now, the first 3 months of NIL, they would go to Chase Griffin, who's the third string quarterback at UCLA. I've not seen anyone handle it as well as he has. And when we have brands, the brands are flocking to him. He is part of multiple campaigns right now, and he's figuring out how to balance it. He's responsive, he over delivers. I mean, he's great. So if we could somehow replicate Chase Griffin across the country, we would be in good shape. But he's the male version of somebody who stands out. On the female side,
So do you guys know him?
there's too many ways. Yeah, I mean,
So I want him at the NASB summit, even if it's remotely, on April 7th. I want to talk seriously, because what the world needs in marketing is examples, right? Very few people actually start with a white sheet of paper and say, what do I need? They like, well, mine is kind of like that, but let me do it. There's a lot of replication that goes on, and it's good, right? So I'd love to have him just kind of talk about what he did. because that could be helpful for thousands of student
For
athletes.
sure, and it's super interesting, the LA Times just did an article about it, like within the last week. So Google Chase Griffin, LA Times, and you'll read, and he talks about how he manages his school load, his practice. He's still trying to be a starting football player, but he has managed it better than anyone that I've seen.
I would just add one thing about sports and women's sports. I think the women's NCAA basketball tournament is completely undervalued and underutilized and underleveraged. It does 3 to 5 million.
You're gonna get me in trouble, because I've already said this, and I've got slings and arrows from all sorts of quarters on it.
Well, I'm not saying anything negative about anybody. I'm just saying there's a huge opportunity. 3 to 5 million viewers. Saw some fantastic examples of potential NIL candidates in the women's Final Four last year across schools, pretty national. And then the other thing I would add to that is, besides being a lot of viewers, there's a lot more predictability who's going to make it into the Final Four in women's. And that's another huge advantage of selecting intelligently the right NIL person. Amplification hasn't happened yet. Jeff Garrett at Publicis indicated that they got over 2 million views of the video.
It's almost 3 million.
Almost 3 million views right now. I can't even keep track. It's going so quickly, and they haven't even really employed amplification strategies.
So I'm gonna,
You mentioned soccer and all this. I'm just curious to know soccer. I mean, it's the biggest growing sport in the country, especially on the female side, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, at this point, there's been, like I said, there's been thousands of athletes and tens of thousands of deals. So it's kind of hard to keep track of that. But to your point, there hasn't been as much activity in that sport. I know
but it's also
there's-
more localized, right? So there are historically strong programs where I think it's probably doing pretty well.
Yeah,
But there's not the magnetism of the sport. It's more magnetism to the team in a particular school.
yeah. I mean, as of right now, in college athletics, football is king, followed by basketball and then everybody else. But soccer is growing and where soccer is a big deal. I don't have insights into that, the activities, but I promise you there are student athletes on soccer teams
Especially on
where
the
soccer
female
is a
side.
big deal.
And we're talking about focusing on females,
For sure.
right? So,
Look at the Big East.
Yeah.
So we're
I'm
gonna
sure
have,
there are deals going on.
so we're gonna have to cut this off. The last word is mine. So, the couple things that I would remind people of. So this opportunity only came to fruition on July 1st of this year, and it was a surprise. So when people say to me, this thing isn't really working, people aren't gonna do it, I'm like, well, actually strategic marketing takes a little bit of time to develop. So at the Fansville Dr. Pepper, the reason I applaud them is they tried to make it work because they wanted to be an early mover. I think you're gonna see a lot more going forward. It may not be the sexy topic for press articles, Griffin being an exception to that, of course. But this is gonna be here to stay, right? And there are so many opportunities on a sponsorship level, whether it's the overarching strategic piece, or as we put in the last question we didn't get to, or it's an activation tool. Either way, this is gonna be a big piece going forward. And, there are no best practices because we're in the very, very early days of doing it. So with that, I'd like to thank Michael and Ray for all of their time and insight.